UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
Surf Excel Hygienic Clean coronavirus 99.9ක් විනාශ කරනවා. හොඳ වැඩවලට ඊට කොරෝනා වලට තිත.
Tonight, interesting developments. With healthcare declared an essential service, the GNOA calls off strike as calls abound for patient rights.
But Sri Lanka patient rights organizations are not there. If these patient rights are there, they can directly go to courts and get an injunction, definitely, say order for these type of rights.
Renegotiate. Bipartisan political group calls on the government to relook at debt.
There are foreign loans that are due. We need to reschedule them immediately, and those steps have to be taken urgently.
Lofty targets. The WHO says COVID acute phase could end this year.
Of course, with one condition.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Saturday, the 12th of February 2022.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Hamid. Now, the country's electricity supply and the healthcare sectors have been declared essential services by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa through a gazette issued under the Essential Services Act No. 61 of 1979. With that, anyone found acting to impede the functioning of the services could be liable for prison terms, fines and possibly property forfeitures if found in contravention of the Act.
A Gazette Extraordinary has been issued declaring the supply of electricity and the provision of healthcare as essential services. Issued by the Presidential Secretariat and signed by the Secretary to the President Gamini Senarath, the Gazette has outlined both services as essential to the life of the community. According to the Gazette, the supply of electricity and all services, work or labour required in connection with the maintenance, reception, care, feeding and treatment of patients in hospitals, nursing homes, dispensaries and other similar institutions will now come under this. This move comes in the wake of public sector strikes that, given the country's current circumstances, could add extra pressure on the public. According to the provision of the Essential Public Services Act No. 61 of 1979, acts by persons that could in any way impede the functioning of these two services could come at a heavy cost. The Act calls for severe penalties such as rigorous imprisonment of not less than 2 years and not exceeding 5, a fine not less than 2,000 rupees and not exceeding 5,000 rupees, or both. Further, the country's courts could also slap forfeitures of movable and immovable property against anyone found guilty of impeding essential services. In addition, offenders could also face removal from any official registers maintained under written law that entitle a person to practice any profession or vocation.
Now, the Government Nursing Officers Association has suspended their strike as of this evening after having received the court order issued by the District Court of Colombo. However, the remaining 17 unions plan to continue their strike as usual. Meanwhile, former chairman of the Human Rights Commission, Professor Pratibha Mahanameheva, believes that the right to health needs to be included in a fundamental right in a new constitution that will be drafted in the future. Despite a stay order being issued by the Colombo District Court on Thursday, ordering the Government Nursing Officers Association to stop their strike for 2 weeks, the strike continued for a 6th day today, with zero regard for the difficulty it was putting the patients in. The excuse was that they haven't received the court order. The strike also continued in a backdrop where the President has issued a Gazette notification declaring the provision of healthcare as an essential service. Speaking to media, the representatives of the other unions engaged in the strike said that they will even look beyond Sri Lankan shores for ways to ensure that their demands are met.
අපි ලෑස්ති මැදට ඇවිල්ලා මේක විසඳ ගන්න කෙසේ වෙතත් මේ ගැටලුව රට තුල විසඳ ගන්න බැරි වුණොත් අපි අන්තර්ජාතික වශයෙන් ජාත්‍යන්තර කම්කරු සංවිධානයේ සමග ගනුදෙනු කරලා හරි විසඳ ගන්න තැනට තල්ලු වෙමින් ඉන්නවා.
Since the GNOA is conducting the strike while a court order has been issued to prevent it, former chief of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka believes that legal implications would be inevitable.
Recently, stay order had been given, so therefore once it communicated to the leaders of these trade unions, they must stop this strike, otherwise it's a contempt of court. On the other side, we have seen basically Gazette has been issued as declaring this as an essential service. In the essential service also, if given some time and not reporting to work, and it also they may have a threat to their employment.
Meanwhile, there were also allegations that non-governmental organizations are orchestrating the strike.
අපිට සෑහෙන තොරතුරු ලැබිලා තියෙනවා අන්තර්ජාතික NGO කීපයක් මගින් මේ සියලුම වියහියදම් දරන්න කටයුතු කරනවා කියලා. ඒ වගේම වෘත්තීය සමිති නායකයන්ට ඒ අනුව හොඳ ගෙවීම් සිද්ධ කරනවා බවට
ගුරුවරයාට පඩිය වැඩි කරනකොට අනිත් එක්කෙනා විරුද්ධ වෙනවා. හෙදියට පඩිය වැඩි කරනකොට විසුරුසේක මහත්තයා විරුද්ධ වෙනවා. ඔන්න සිස්ටම් එකයි මේක වෙනස් වෙ යුත්තේ.
This evening, however, the Government Nursing Officers Association suspended the strike, stating that they have received the court order. However, they said that the remaining 17 unions will continue the strike further. For 6 days, hospital services have been crippled with there being no health staff to provide services. But the bitter reality is that strikes in medical sector are all too common in Sri Lanka, with patients suffering at each and every turn. One expert believes that things must change, even from a rights perspective.
Sri Lanka, access to free health has been given for a long time, and these patients have a clean right to get their free health. Now we have seen Sri Lanka, there are two loopholes. Number one, Sri Lanka, there is no patient charter. Most of the countries, there are patient charters. In the patient charters, you have the patient's rights as well as responsibilities. So in that case, if a patient cannot get the free access to health, explicit access to health, then they can go under violation of the patient's charter. Number two, 1978 Constitution, there are fundamental human rights. Under the fundamental human rights, we have not seen right to health as a free right. So therefore, Sri Lanka, right to health is not a fundamental human right. So those two must come in future. When a constitution is going to be set up, it has to be incorporated in chapter 3 as a fundamental human right. On the other hand, GMO is very powerful and the other unions are very powerful, trade unions. But Sri Lanka patient rights organizations are not there, like in Western and India. So if these patient rights are there, they can directly go to courts and get a injunction, definitely stay order for these type of rights.
Now moving on with other stories, a group of bipartisan political personalities convened by Lanka Tamil Araskanchi parliamentarian MS Sumandiran to discuss the country's present economic situation have called on the government to engage in a multi-step process to renegotiate Sri Lanka's debt. A communique in this regard was issued yesterday, calling on the government to urgently seek remedial action to focus on delivering essential supplies to the public.
A joint statement has been issued by a bipartisan collective of senior parliamentarians addressing concerns about Sri Lanka's current economic problems. After a series of closed-door meetings that were held this month, an official statement was released yesterday outlining their request to the government. Citing high external debt to GDP levels, interest payments and forex shortages, the collective calls for the government to engage in a multi-step process towards an orderly negotiated postponement and restructuring of its sovereign debt repayments. According to the group, it is only through such a process that Sri Lanka can correct its policies towards sustainable economic growth and debt management, while ensuring access to essential goods for the Sri Lankan people. Speaking to AdaDerana English News today, Lanka Tamil Araskanchi parliamentarian MS Sumandiran explained the group's intentions.
By the end of January, I took an initiative to invite party leaders in parliament to discuss the very serious economic situation that the country had fallen into. I invited several party leaders and also the three finance chairs of the three committees in parliament. We got the assistance of some experts, economists, to brief us on the situation in the country, and we realized the unprecedented situation with regard to the economy that the country had fallen into. And so we decided to meet again, and on the 10th of February we met. There are foreign loans that are due. We need to reschedule them immediately, and those steps have to be taken urgently. So that's the first request. The second is that by doing that, we will have foreign currency that is available to buy essential goods and services for the people of the country. And thirdly, when such rescheduling is done, that the government must take care to ensure that the poor are protected, that the social security measures that are in place are not compromised, And so leaders from different political parties have jointly made this appeal. The longer you wait, the more difficult it's going to be. So before we come to a point of not being able to repay the debt, we must negotiate with our creditors so that gives us breathing space and also ensures that the poor don't go without food.
In addition, the Northern Province MP also responded to comments made in Parliament yesterday on alleged secret meetings being held against the government.
These meetings were closed-door meetings. It had to be closed-door. You can't have discussion of this nature in public in the full glare of the media. But they were not secret meetings. Unfortunately, Honourable Minister Shehan Semasinghe has gone on record saying that there is some conspiracy and some secret meetings that are held. After the first meeting on the 27th of January, I issued a media statement explaining what this process was. And on the 10th of February, before we met, I spoke to him in Parliament. In fact, I invited him to come for the meeting in the evening. Despite knowing that we were taking certain responsible steps, it's unfortunate that he has made very irresponsible statements such as that.
Foreign Minister Professor GL Peiris insists that people in the north do not desire to see triforces personnel being hauled before international tribunals, and what they seek are common to all. Speaking at the National Defence College recently, the minister elaborated on his recent visit to Jaffna and hinted that too much value placed on ethnic and religious identity may be at the heart of present-day divisions among communities.
The Honourable Ali Sabri and I spent 3 days in Jaffna. So we met a whole spectrum of people. Nobody told us that they wanted the armed forces prosecuted. Their issues were very different. The main grievance was that the forest cover was excessive. Now we were told in some areas the forest cover is much as 60% to 70%. If that is the case, then people don't have sufficient land to build houses and for cultivation. Then they also spoke of problems connected with the availability of water for cultivation. Jaffna has a large number of lagoons, but the northern province does not have a river. Then they brought up other questions which are common to young people in other parts of the country as well. That is the mismatch between education and employment. People are educated, they have paper qualifications, but no access to livelihood. That creates resentment. So the young people who spoke to us in Jaffna said the same thing. We want the kind of education that will equip us to get good jobs, get a decent income and achieve social mobility. Now these are the issues they discussed with us. They didn't say they want the army, navy and the air force brought before international tribunal. So this kind of demand against the armed forces is not really something that emanates from the grassroots. The way forward is to unite all our people.
Foreign Minister Professor GL Peiris also highlighted a key element in bringing youth from different ethnicities together, while hinting that racial identity may be given too much emphasis in present day.
I visited 2 schools in Jaffna, each of which is more than 200 years old. There was no hostility at all. So I told the principals of those schools, why don't you increase the degree of contact between schools in the north and schools in the south? Then they will realize that their aspirations are common to everybody. Unfortunately, the educational system tends to emphasize the differences rather than the things that we have in common. It is largely to do with language also. I was a student in University of AdaDerana for 1 year before the Faculty of Law was shifted to Colombo. Now we made friendship on the basis of shared interests and values. In those days, we were not overly conscious of racial or ethnic identity. Why? Because we could all speak to each other very easily and comfortably in the English language. I mean, today, Sinhala students don't speak Tamil, the Tamil students don't speak Sinhala, and neither group is really comfortable with the English language. So we must work towards uniting our people. I'm convinced that this is possible. So there is enough to build upon. So this is what we will say in Geneva to the Human Rights Council, in New York to the General Assembly.
We will see shortly. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the World Health Organization believes that the world might finally be able to be rid of the acute phase of the COVID pandemic, but under one condition. Its chief, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says that full vaccination by mid this year will see it happen, but otherwise we'll have to play hide and seek with the virus.
Our expectation is that the acute phase of this pandemic will end this year. Of course, with one condition, meaning the 70% vaccination by mid this year, around June, July. If that can be done, the acute phase can really end. And that's what we're expecting. It's in our hands. And that's why we were saying it's not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. So if the world wants to end it, it has the means to end it. If it wants to continue to be greedy and doesn't want to end it, then it will not end. That's the problem. So we will continue to play hide and seek with this virus, and the virus will have safe haven to evolve. Identify variants, report immediately is a behavior that should be rewarded, not punished.
Now, experts in accessible tourism believe that Sri Lanka can hopefully be an attractive tourist destination for people with disabilities within the next 5 years, catering to a whole new untapped category of tourists. Now, these views came during a webinar on medical and wellness tourism, with advice given to the wellness tourism sector to build good customer profiles.
As a destination, we have so many things that we can offer, but what we need is more understanding about the client base and be ready. So the curating experiences, that is giving much more meaning. So the new traveler will look for that deep meaning. I think as a destination, it's high time the hotels who are getting into wellness business and the travel companies learn to do the profile analysis of these clients and give a lot of training for your team so that you will really address these clients. And then when you really treat them, you give that best option to them, they become your repeaters.
In the meantime, the importance of accessible tourism to Sri Lanka as a means of expanding the country's tourist market was also explained.
The important thing for the government especially to realise, if they want to get some more foreign income, foreign reserves, they need to attract as many people as they can to Sri Lanka. They're more interested in experiences. At the moment, if people with a mobility problem, if they want to go to Asia, they would go to Thailand or even Vietnam. But seeing that Sri Lanka has got everything that those countries have, Sri Lanka is missing out on exploiting the natural resources it's got. So hopefully in 5 years' time, Sri Lanka will be seen as an accessible tourist destination.
Now, Sri Lanka hit records in both its trade deficit and cumulative export earnings for the year 2021. The trade deficit widened in December by slightly over $1 billion, its highest ever recorded monthly figure. However, exporters have much to celebrate in the year, with cumulative exports hitting its highest ever levels, with a spike of 24.4% to $12.5 billion.
The deficit in the trade account in the month of December 2021 has widened to its highest ever monthly value of $1.085 billion, compared to a deficit of $562 million recorded in December 2020. This brings the cumulative trade deficit in 2021 to $8.136 billion, an almost $2 billion increase compared to 2020. However, December's merchandise export earnings grew by 19.9% year-on-year to $1.156 billion due to increases observed across all main categories. Industrial exports were cited as the main contributor. This took cumulative export earnings in 2021 up by 24.4% to $12.502 billion year-on-year, with 2020 recording $10.047 billion. This is the highest ever export earnings for a year recorded in history, compared to the previous highest of $11.940 billion recorded in 2019. Earning increases were reported in most sectors, including garments, agricultural goods, petroleum products, food, beverages and tobacco, and rubber products.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.